I lived with my wife, Diana, in a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. We bought it with a VA loan, my grandfather's legacy, not mine, in a neighborhood where the houses were all nearly identical, where everyone's dreams fit into the same blueprint. The house sat on a corner lot at the end of Oakmont Drive, a street lined with oak trees that had been planted in the 1970s and had grown into a kind of architectural canopy. In spring, the blossoms would drift down like snow. In summer, they provided shade that kept the house cool despite the lack of air conditioning. In fall, the leaves turned colors that were almost offensive in their beauty. Oranges and reds and yellows that made you wonder why anyone needed paintings when the world could do this. Our house was painted a soft gray with white shutters. There was a front porch with 2 rocking chairs, a detail Diana had insisted on, though we rarely sat in them. The lawn was modest in size, and I kept it meticulously maintained, not out of any desire for perfection, but because there was something meditative about mowing it every Saturday morning, about keeping something in order when so much of life seemed determined to fall into chaos. The grass would grow in uniform patterns under the blade of my mower. The edges would be crisp along the driveway. For those few hours every week, I could control something completely. It was a good house, solid, the kind of house that promised stability in a world that was increasingly unsteady. It was the kind of house that made you believe that good things could last. I was a construction foreman and had been for 15 years at that point. I started at 5:30 a.m. most mornings, standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that was too hot and a breakfast sandwich that was too cold by the time I finished it. I would review the day's work orders while the sun was still a promise on the horizon. By 6 a.m. I would be in my truck, a 2004 Ford F-250 that had seen better days but ran with the kind of reliability you could depend on, heading toward whatever construction site needed me that day. The work itself was never complicated in concept, though it was always complicated in execution. I was responsible for a crew of anywhere from 8 to 20 men, depending on the scale of the project. We built things: office buildings, warehouses, parking structures, shopping centers, the bones of the world that most people never thought about. We would show up before dawn, and we would work until the sun started its descent, coordinating deliveries of materials, managing timelines, ensuring safety protocols, disciplining workers who got lazy, encouraging workers who got tired, problem-solving everything from equipment failures to personality conflicts to the simple mathematics of keeping a project on schedule when the world seemed determined to delay it. There was a satisfaction to the work that went beyond money. You could know that it would stand for decades after you were gone. That people would work inside it, that businesses would flourish there, that lives would be changed within its walls, all because you had shown up and done your job correctly. The pay was decent. Not wealthy by any means, but more than most people made in our neighborhood. $60,000 a year in the early 2000s was respectable income. It was enough for the mortgage, $899 a month, which seemed astronomical to me until I met other men with houses in different neighborhoods paying twice that. It was enough for property taxes and utilities and the car payment on Diana's Honda Civic, which she insisted on despite my arguments that we could get by with one vehicle. It was enough for groceries and the occasional dinner out, the rare vacation where we would drive down to some beach town and stay in a modest hotel. It was enough that we never had to worry about money in the way that people who live paycheck to paycheck worry about money. We weren't rich, but we were safe. We had a margin for error, but it wasn't enough for Diana, not in the way that matters. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, there were signs, small at first, then gradually larger, like cracks spreading across a windshield. But in the moment, I was so focused on my work, so absorbed in the daily logistics of building things, that I missed the signs that something was breaking at home. I was distracted by the logistics of getting concrete poured on time, by managing crews of men with different personalities and work ethics, by the 1,000 small crises that happened on every job site. By the time I came home in the evenings, I was drained in a way that made it difficult to see what was happening right in front of me. Diana came from money. Not a lot of money by the standards of the truly wealthy, but enough money that she had grown up expecting certain things. Her father was an accountant for a mid-sized firm in Columbus, the kind of man who wore suits to work and came home to a house where dinner was prepared by hired help. Her mother was a real estate agent who drove a Mercedes and wore jewelry that caught the light in ways that made it impossible to ignore. They lived in a house that was 3 times the size of ours, in a neighborhood where the houses were spaced far apart and the lawns were tended by professional landscapers. Every blade of grass was perfect. Diana had gone to private school. She had taken piano lessons and ballet lessons and spent summers at a country club, learning to play tennis and golf and to move through social situations with the kind of ease that comes from wealth. She had learned to expect that life would be pleasant, that people would defer to her, that the world would bend to accommodate her preferences. Then she married me. I had met her at a friend's wedding in 2001. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost accidental, like she hadn't quite realized how attractive she was and so was always slightly surprised when people looked at her. She had dark hair that she wore long, and eyes that were a strange shade of gray-blue that reminded me of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. She was wearing a pale green dress that matched those eyes, and when our eyes met across the reception hall, something shifted in both of us. There was a moment of recognition, not of familiarity, but of possibility. Of the sense that meeting this person mattered in a way that I couldn't quite articulate. I was 25 years old. I had never been in love. I had dated a few girls in high school and one girl in college, but nothing that had felt like what I felt when I looked at Diana. I didn't even know what love felt like until I saw Diana laugh at something her friend whispered in her ear, and the sound of that laugh made my chest ache with a longing I couldn't name. It was a physical sensation, as though something inside me was reaching toward her, wanting to be part of whatever was making her smile like that. We talked for 4 hours that night. We didn't dance. We didn't mingle with the other guests or participate in the celebration happening around us. We sat in a quiet corner of the reception hall, in a pair of chairs that had been placed there for decoration, and we talked. She told me about her dreams of travel, of seeing the world, of doing something meaningful with her life. Though, when I asked what that meaningful thing might be, she was vague. I told her about my work, about the satisfaction of building something that would last decades after I was gone, about the men I worked with and the respect I had for their labor. I told her about my grandfather, who had been a carpenter, who had taught me that there was dignity in building things with your hands. At the end of the night, I asked if I could call her. She gave me her number and wrote it in my palm with a pen from her purse. The ink was blue and precise. I watched the letters form, committing them to memory. The ink smudged as I drove home, but I had committed every digit to memory before it could disappear. We dated for 18 months before I proposed. I got down on one knee in the same parking lot where we had had our first kiss, after a movie at the Drexel Theater downtown. It had been raining that night, and we had stood in the rain while our lips met for the first time, and Diana had tasted like popcorn and something sweet. The ring I gave her was modest, a single diamond on a white gold band, but it was the most expensive thing I had ever bought. I had saved for 6 months to afford it, putting money aside from each paycheck, seeing the total grow slowly. I worried the whole time that she would say no, that I would have spent all that money for nothing. She said yes. She cried. She kissed me. She told me she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. She looked at the ring like it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, though I knew from seeing similar rings in jewelry store windows that it was modest compared to what other men gave their fiancés. But she didn't seem to care. she looked happy in a way that I thought was genuine. We were married 10 months later, on a Saturday in October. The wedding was at a country club, her choice, not mine. I had wanted something smaller, something more intimate. I had suggested our church, a quiet ceremony with just family and close friends. But Diana had looked at me like I had suggested something scandalous, and her mother had intervened, making it clear that a country club wedding was what was expected. I didn't want to fight about it, so I conceded. I understood that this was her moment, and I was happy to give her that. There were 200 people. There was a band that played songs I didn't recognize. There were flowers everywhere, white roses and pink peonies and baby's breath arranged by a professional florist who charged more than I made in a month. My father cried during the ceremony, sitting in the front pew with tears streaming down his face. My mother held my hand and whispered that she was proud of me. Diana's mother looked satisfied in the way that powerful people look when things proceed according to their expectations. After the reception, we drove to Niagara Falls for our honeymoon. We stayed in a small bed and breakfast overlooking the falls. The roar of the water was so loud you couldn't think. It filled the space where thoughts would normally go. I remember Diana leaning against me, watching the water cascade, and I remember thinking that I was the luckiest man alive. I remember feeling like the future was something bright and solid, something I could build on. The first few years of our marriage were genuinely happy. We settled into a routine that felt comfortable. I would leave for work early, before dawn most days. Diana would sleep in, then spend her day however she wanted. Sometimes she would go to the mall and browse stores she couldn't afford to shop at. Sometimes she would visit her mother for lunch at expensive restaurants, the kind where everyone dressed nicely and no one raised their voice. Sometimes she would sit in the backyard and read novels, lying on a lounge chair under the shade of the oak trees. In the evenings, I would come home, exhausted and covered in the day's work, and she would greet me at the door like she had been waiting for me specifically. We would cook dinner together or order takeout, and we would watch television or talk about our days. She would tell me about her friends, about things she had read or heard. I would tell her about the job, about problems we had solved, about the men I worked with. She was happy, I think. Or at least, she seemed happy. There was a light in her eyes that suggested contentment. There was ease in the way she moved through our house, through our life. Sex was good, frequent. There was a playfulness to it in those early years, an exploration of each other that felt like an ongoing discovery. I loved her body. I loved the feel of her skin under my hands. I loved the sounds she made when she came, the way she would grip me tightly, the way she would call my name. I loved falling asleep with my arms around her, my face buried in her hair, feeling her heartbeat slow and deepen into sleep. Sex felt like a conversation, a way of communicating things that we couldn't quite say with words. But somewhere around year 3, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic or obvious. It was subtle, the way that most important changes are subtle. It was subtle at first. She would comment on the smell of my clothes when I came home from work, not in a playful way, but with a kind of revulsion that made me immediately uncomfortable. "You smell like the job site," she would say, wrinkling her nose in a way that suggested I smelled like garbage. I would immediately go shower, even if I had already showered at work and changed into clean clothes in the job site trailer. She would suggest that I wear nicer clothes on weekends. Not work clothes, she would say, with an emphasis that suggested my work clothes were somehow shameful. "Don't let people see you that way." The implication was that there was something unacceptable about what I wore, about how I presented myself to the world. By year 5, the comments had evolved into something more pointed. By year 5, they had become an undercurrent in every conversation, a persistent suggestion that I was somehow inadequate. "My mother asked me yesterday why you don't wear a suit," Diana said one evening. sitting at the dinner table while I ate the pasta she had made. She had made it from scratch. Fresh pasta, a sauce with cream and mushrooms, fresh parmesan. It was delicious, and I was focused on eating, on the satisfaction of a home-cooked meal after a long day. The comment came out of nowhere, or so it seemed. I looked up from my plate. The sudden focus on me was jarring. "Well, you're always in work clothes," Diana said, not meeting my eyes. She was looking at her own plate, pushing pasta around with her fork. "Khakis and t-shirts and work boots. I am successful," I said carefully. "I make a good living. I provide for our family. I'm good at my job." "I know," Diana said, her voice softening. It was a softening that felt calculated, that felt designed to make me lower my guard. "It's just, wouldn't you want to be seen as more? Wouldn't you want people to know that you're not just a construction worker?" It was the first time she had ever said anything like that. It wouldn't be the last. That phrase, "not just a construction worker," would echo through our marriage like a bell ringing. It suggested that what I was, what I had chosen to do with my life, was somehow insufficient. It suggested that I should want to be different, should want to be more respectable, more dignified, more worthy of respect. Over the next couple of years, these comments accumulated like snow in winter. Every few weeks, there would be a new suggestion. Why didn't I consider going back to school? She would frame it as something she wanted for me, something she thought I was capable of. My father had a connection at a business management firm. Why didn't I see if they had openings? Construction was such hard work, such a blue-collar profession. Didn't I want something more respectable? Didn't I want to work in an office where I could dress nicely and have a prestigious career? I tried to explain to her that I liked construction, that I was good at it, that there was dignity in building things, in being skilled at a trade, in creating something tangible that would outlast me. I tried to tell her that I had chosen this work deliberately, that it wasn't the result of lack of ambition, but rather a clear-eyed decision about what I valued. But she would just smile and nod like I was a child explaining my dream of becoming an astronaut, and say, "Of course, sweetheart." The implication was clear. What I had chosen was not enough. I was not enough. By year 8, the bedroom had become a minefield. We made love less frequently. When we did, Diana was often distracted, sometimes even resistant. She would tolerate my advances rather than welcome them, as though she was doing me a favor by allowing me to touch her. Afterward, there was often a tension that hadn't been there before. A withdrawal, a coldness, a sense that what had just happened was something she had endured rather than enjoyed. Once, I asked her if something was wrong, if she was unhappy with me physically. The question came out carefully because I was already afraid of the answer. She had rolled away from me in the dark, her back to me, and said, "I'm fine." But it wasn't about being tired. I could feel it in the way her body had stiffened when I touched her. I could feel it in the way she had turned away from my kiss. There was something deeper happening, something that she wasn't saying. It was a distance that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with the choice she was making to withdraw from me, to pull back from our marriage. I lay awake for hours that night, listening to her breathe, wondering what I had done wrong, what I had failed to provide, what I was lacking that made her pull away from me like I was something contaminated. The first sign came on a Tuesday afternoon in spring. I had injured my wrist at a job site, a simple accident, nothing that would have seemed important if I had known what was about to unfold. A section of scaffolding had shifted, and I'd put my hand out to catch it, a reflexive action that probably saved someone else from getting hurt but resulted in my wrist getting twisted in an unnatural way. It hurt immediately, a sharp, bright pain that made me suck in my breath. The foreman had asked if I could continue working, and I had said yes at first, But after an hour, the pain had gotten worse, not better. He had sent me home with instructions to get it checked out at the urgent care. I drove home around 2:30 p.m., earlier than I normally would have. I was thinking about ice and ibuprofen and whether Diana would make me her famous chicken soup, the way she used to when I was sick or injured. That thought, that she might take care of me, felt important as I drove home. It felt like it might indicate that some part of her still cared about me, still wanted to comfort me when I was hurt. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked in front of the house. It was a newer model, a sleek silver sedan with leather interior visible through the windows. The paint job was pristine, expensive. This was not the car of someone who worked in construction. This was the car of someone who worked in an office, someone who made more money than I did. Someone was visiting Diana during the middle of a weekday afternoon. I grabbed my stuff from the truck and went inside. I wasn't suspicious. I didn't think anything was wrong. People visited my wife. Her friends came over. Her mother would sometimes stop by. It didn't seem unusual. I called out as I came through the door. "I'm home early. I hurt my wrist." I stopped. There was a sound coming from upstairs. Not voices. Not the television. A sound that I recognized immediately because I had made that same sound with Diana hundreds of times over the course of our marriage. A rhythmic creaking. The unmistakable sound of the bed moving. The sound of sex. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I stood in the hallway with my injured wrist throbbing and the day's dust still on my work clothes. And I listened to my wife being with another man in the bed we shared, in the house we had bought together, in the life we had built. The rational part of my brain told me to go upstairs, to confront them, to demand an explanation, to assert myself in whatever way was necessary to make this stop. But another part of me, the part that was already dying inside, that was already beginning to understand that something fundamental had broken, simply turned around and walked back out of the house. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, just sat there, gripping the steering wheel with my good hand, staring at nothing. My mind was moving in slow motion, unable to process what I had heard. The sound didn't make sense. It shouldn't have been possible. And yet, it had been unmistakable. I couldn't convince myself that I had misunderstood. I couldn't find any interpretation of those sounds that didn't lead to the same conclusion. My wife was cheating on me. Then I saw the bedroom curtain move on the second floor. Someone was checking to see if the coast was clear. Someone was making sure no one had come home. No one would catch them. 5 minutes later, a man came down the stairs. I couldn't see his face from where I was parked, but I could see his body. Tall, athletic, the kind of physique that came from expensive gym memberships and personal trainers. He was wearing a business suit, a tailored thing that probably cost more than I made in a week. He was buttoning his shirt as he walked. He didn't look furtive or guilty. He looked casual, like this was something he did regularly, like he had no fear of being caught. He got into the silver sedan and drove away. I waited another 10 minutes before getting out of my truck. My wrist was throbbing, but the physical pain seemed irrelevant compared to what was happening inside my chest. I went back inside. Diana was in the kitchen, acting casual. She was wearing a robe, her hair still damp from a shower. Her cheeks were flushed. When she saw me, her face went white, and I understood that she had not expected me to come back in. She had probably thought I would go to the urgent care, get my wrist wrapped, and come home later. By then, whatever had happened upstairs would be cleaned up, erased, hidden. "Marcus," she said, her voice high and strained. "I thought you were at work. What happened?" "I hurt my wrist," I said, holding it up. The gesture felt absurd. The physical pain seemed like it belonged to someone else, to a version of me from 5 minutes ago who didn't know that his marriage was being destroyed. The foreman sent me home. Diana opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I could see her calculating, seeing if she could lie to me, if she could convince me that I hadn't heard what I had heard, hadn't seen what I had seen. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "Yes, you do," I said quietly. "I came home early. I heard you. I saw him leave." For a moment, I thought she was going to lie to me. The effort of maintaining the lie was visible on her face, the way her jaw tightened, the way her eyes moved back and forth like she was reading a script that she was trying to memorize. But the lie was too obvious, too easily disprovable. I had seen the man with my own eyes. I had heard what I had heard. Something in her face shifted. The effort of maintaining the lie became too much. She was tired, I think. Tired of pretending to be happy with me. Tired of pretending that our marriage was something worth saving. "His name is Brad," she said finally. "Brad Carmichael. He's a financial advisor." I felt something break inside me. Not my wrist. That was just a sprain, and it would heal with time and rest and ice. But something deeper. Some foundational belief I had about my marriage, about Diana, about myself. The foundation cracked, and everything I thought was solid proved to be unstable. I asked. Diana looked away. She couldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know, Marcus." The honesty of that answer was somehow worse than a lie would have been. A lie would have suggested that she felt guilty, that she was trying to minimize what she had done. But the truth, that she had lost count of how many times she had been with another man, suggested something far more damaging. It suggested that it had become routine, that she had been with Brad so many times that she couldn't remember them individually. They had blended together into a pattern, a regular occurrence, like a standing appointment. It meant she had had time to think about what she was doing, and she had chosen to do it anyway. Over and over, she had chosen another man over our marriage, over the commitment she had made to me, over the vows she had taken in front of 200 people. "I want you to leave," I said. "Marcus, now, Diana." She packed a bag. She didn't argue. She went upstairs and came back down with a suitcase and a carry-on bag, the kind of bags you pack when you're planning to be gone for a while. She called Brad, and he came back to get her. I stood in the living room and watched them leave together, watched him help her load her bags into the trunk of his sedan, watched them drive away. I felt like I was watching my entire life being loaded into a silver sedan and driven away. For the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. I was obsessed with understanding what had happened, with gathering evidence, with trying to comprehend how my marriage had been destroyed in a moment that I hadn't even known was catastrophic. It was like being handed a puzzle with half the pieces missing, and spending all your time trying to figure out what the complete picture was supposed to look like. I didn't confront Diana. Not yet. Instead, I became a detective investigating my own life, documenting the infidelity like it was a crime scene that needed to be carefully preserved and analyzed. I pulled the credit card statements. There were charges at hotels, the Westgate Motel on Tuesday afternoons, always Tuesday afternoons, like they had a standing date. The Riverside Inn on occasional Saturday mornings when I was supposed to be at a job site working on weekend projects. There were restaurants I had never heard of, fancy places downtown where the names alone suggested expensive wine and intimate lighting. These weren't quick lunches. These were dinners, evening activities, occasions that suggested planning and intention. I traced his name, Brad Carmichael. I looked him up online, scrolling through LinkedIn until I found his profile. He was handsome, I had to admit. Not in the way that construction workers are handsome, with the kind of toughness that comes from working outside in all weather. He was handsome in a polished way, expensive haircut regularly, a tan that came from vacations rather than sun exposure from work, teeth that had clearly been whitened professionally. He had gone to an Ivy League school, one of those places that automatically assumed you would be successful because of where you had gone to school. He had a corner office and a six-figure salary. He was, by any reasonable measure, more successful than I was. Better looking. More sophisticated. Everything that Diana had been hinting that she wanted me to be. I drove past his office building downtown. I sat in my truck and watched him leave for lunch one day, and I saw Diana meeting him on the street corner. They didn't kiss. They were in public. But the way they moved together, the way he touched her arm as they walked, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't a moment of weakness on her part. This was something deeper. This was a real relationship, built over months, built carefully and deliberately. I started tracking their patterns. Tuesday afternoons at the Westgate. Always checking in around 2 p.m., always leaving around 4 p.m. Saturday mornings at the Riverside, once or twice a month, usually when I had told Diana I would be working on a weekend project. Friday evenings at various restaurants around the city, places where they could be seen together in public without worrying too much about running into people who knew us. I collected evidence like a man building a case against a stranger, not realizing that the stranger was my wife. The worst part wasn't the infidelity itself. The worst part was realizing how long it had been going on and how little Diana had cared about hiding it. She had parked her car at work while taking an Uber to meet him, covering her tracks while making sure she had her own transportation home. She had told me she was going shopping and gone to hotels instead. She had looked me in the eye and lied to me repeatedly, and each lie had accumulated, creating a structure of deception that was so elaborate that I wondered how she kept track of it all. The worst part was understanding that she hadn't just cheated on me once in a moment of weakness. She had built an entire parallel life. She had managed two identities simultaneously, the wife at home and the girlfriend downtown. She had lived in both worlds, splitting herself in half, becoming two different people depending on where she was and who she was with. I collected all of this information methodically, filling a manila folder with credit card statements and hotel receipts and photographs I took myself of Brad's car parked outside various locations. I documented everything with the precision of someone building a case for court. But collecting the evidence wasn't about preparing for a confrontation. It was about trying to understand. It was about looking at the facts and seeing if they could explain what had happened, if they could make sense of it. They couldn't. No amount of documentation could explain why she had chosen to betray me. I waited 3 weeks. 3 weeks of coming home to a house that felt empty, that echoed with the absence of her. 3 weeks of sleeping in our bed alone, on my side of the mattress, trying not to think about who else had been in it. 3 weeks of gathering evidence, of documenting her betrayal, of trying to understand how the woman I had married had become someone I didn't recognize. And then, on a Thursday evening, I asked Diana to come home so that we could talk. She arrived with Brad's car still in the driveway. They hadn't even bothered to hide it anymore. She was wearing the same dress she had worn the day she left. She looked confident, like she had made a decision and was comfortable with it, like she wasn't about to have her life torn apart. We sat in the living room. The same living room where we had watched 1,000 movies together, where we had fallen asleep on this same couch, where we had made plans for a future that had apparently been a lie. The furniture was the same. The decorations on the walls were the same. But the space felt different now. It felt like a space where something had died. "I know about Brad," I said. "I know about the Westgate. I know about the Riverside Inn. I know about the restaurants, the hotels, the Saturday mornings." I pulled out the manila folder and set it on the coffee table between us. The documents spilled out. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, photographs of his car, notes I had written about the dates and times of her meetings with him. Diana's face went cold. Not ashamed, not guilty, cold. It was the coldness of someone who had made a decision and was no longer interested in defending it, or explaining it, or apologizing for it. She said, just one word, but it contained everything. It contained an assumption that there was nothing I could do with this information, nothing that would matter. I repeated, not sure I'd heard her correctly. So, Diana, you're my wife. You made a commitment to me. You made vows in front of 200 people. I made a commitment to a lie, she said, standing up. Her voice was rising now, her anger starting to surface. I made a commitment to being invisible in my own marriage. That's not fair, I said. I work hard, I provide for us. You work hard at a job you don't need to work at, Diana said, her voice harsh now, her words coming faster. You could have gone to college. You could have gotten a degree. You could have built a career in finance or business or technology. But instead, you chose to be content with being mediocre. I'm not mediocre, I said. I'm a foreman. I manage multi-million-dollar projects. I'm respected in my field. You manage construction sites, Diana said, bitterly, enunciating each word carefully like she was trying to make sure I understood how contemptible she found what I did. You come home covered in dirt, smelling like sweat and diesel fuel. You fall asleep watching television by 9 o'clock. You never want to go anywhere nice. You never want to meet people who matter. You're content with this suburban hell, and you expect me to be content with it too. Well, I'm not, Marcus. I'm not content. I thought you were happy, I said. I haven't been happy in years, Diana said. Brad makes me feel alive. He takes me to nice restaurants. He talks about his work, his investments, his plans for the future. The words hit me like physical blows. Each one struck something vital, left me reeling. She had erased me. In her mind, in her narrative of what had happened, I had ceased to matter. I had become an obstacle to her happiness rather than a partner in it. You matter to me, I said, and I could hear the desperation in my voice. But I don't matter enough for you to change, Diana said. I don't matter enough for you to want more out of life. I don't matter enough for you to try. If I mattered, you would have wanted to be better for me. I asked, though I already knew the answer. I had known it since I watched Brad leave our house that afternoon with his shirt still being buttoned. I had known it every day for the past 3 weeks as I sat in my truck and tracked her movements and documented her betrayal. I'm saying I want a divorce, Diana said. I'm saying I'm done pretending that this marriage means something. I'm saying I want to be with someone who actually wants something out of life. The word, mediocre, hung in the air between us like poison gas. She had taken everything I had given her, everything I had worked for, and she had reduced it to that single word, mediocre. Not good enough, not worthy of her. The divorce process was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. Diana's lawyer was a woman named Patricia Marsh, a ruthless advocate who seemed to have made it her personal mission to extract as much from me as possible. She filed for spousal support, claiming that I had held Diana back from her career aspirations by requiring her to manage the household. She went for the house, arguing that Diana had chosen its decorations and had made it a home. She went for the car, which Diana had been making payments on. She went for half the retirement account I had been building for 15 years, money that I had contributed to every single paycheck, money that was supposed to be for my future. And I let her have it all. I signed the papers without fighting. I didn't contest her claims. I didn't hire an aggressive lawyer to fight for my rights. I didn't argue or negotiate. What was the point? She had made it clear that she didn't want to be married to me, and I was too broken to fight for someone who had made that choice so decisively. Every time I looked at the documents, every time I saw a new claim filed against me, I felt like I was drowning. The house went to her. I moved out on a Sunday morning in October, exactly 6 months after Brad had first driven away in his silver sedan. I packed up my things and left. The house had never really been mine anyway, I thought. It had been Diana's. She had decorated it, had made it beautiful, had filled it with the things she loved. It made sense that it should go to her. I had only ever been visiting there anyway. The car went to her as well. I kept the truck, which was old and paid for, which still ran reliably despite its age. The retirement account was split, but through some legal sleight of hand that I didn't have the energy to understand, she got the larger portion. The lawyer argued that I had held Diana back from building her own retirement account, and therefore I owed her compensation for that loss. The judge agreed. I signed the papers. I kept the knowledge that I had been betrayed. I kept that like it was a treasured possession. The apartment I moved into was above a hardware store on the east side of Columbus. It was a one-bedroom place with thin walls and a window that overlooked an alley where people threw garbage and where rats scurried at night. The floors were covered in a linoleum that had been installed sometime in the 1980s and had never been updated. The kitchen was barely functional. A stove with burners that heated unevenly. A refrigerator that hummed loudly and seemed to leak water from somewhere beneath it. The bathroom had a shower that alternated between scalding hot and freezing cold with no middle ground. The rent was $450 a month, which was less than I was paying in spousal support. I was working full-time, making decent money, but the spousal support payments, $500 a month for the first 3 years, consumed most of my income. Food and utilities and other basic necessities came next. What was left over was almost nothing. For the first few months, I was able to function on pure inertia. I would wake up, though waking up felt like swimming through mud. I would go to work, I would manage my crews, go through the motions, make the decisions that needed to be made. I would come home and drink a beer. I would sit on my small bed in my small apartment and stare at the wall. I would sleep. I would repeat. But somewhere around month 6, the functionality started to crack. I started missing days at work. Not many, just 1 or 2 a month at first. I would wake up and feel like the weight of my body was too much to bear. Getting out of bed seemed impossible. Going to work seemed impossible. Being around people who expected me to be competent and functional seemed impossible. I would call in and make up an excuse. My truck had broken down. I was sick. I had a family emergency. My supervisor was understanding at first, then less understanding as the pattern continued. My supervisor eventually called me into his office. His name was Tom, a man in his 50s who had worked his way up from the ground level just like I had. He had always been fair with me, had always respected my work. "Marcus, you're a good foreman," he said, and I could hear the pity in his voice. The pity was worse than anger would have been. Anger I could have fought against, but pity was something I deserved. "But something's going on with you. You're not yourself. You've changed. Do you need to talk to someone? We have an employee assistance program. It's confidential." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Just dealing with some personal stuff." I wasn't fine, and I wasn't going to be okay. I was drowning, and every day I went to work was just me thrashing around, pretending that I was still swimming. Every day I functioned was an act of will, a conscious decision to keep moving, to not give in to the weight that was pressing down on me from all sides. The apartment became my refuge and my prison. I stopped going out except for work. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped returning phone calls. I lost weight because cooking felt like too much effort. and food didn't taste like anything anymore. Eating became a chore. Something I did because I knew I needed to survive, but without any pleasure or satisfaction. I would buy cheap food, ramen noodles, canned soup, frozen dinners, and I would eat it without tasting it. I drank more. Not every day. But on the days when I did drink, I drank a lot. I would sit on my bed with a bottle of whiskey, cheap whiskey, whatever was on sale, and I would think about Diana and Brad, and I would wonder what I had done wrong. What was it about me that had made her need to find someone else? What was it about my personality, my ambitions, my entire being that had been so fundamentally inadequate that she had needed to betray me? I would imagine Brad in my bed, with my wife. I would imagine her making the sounds that she used to make for me, but making them for him now. The images would repeat in my mind, playing over and over like a video on loop, until I couldn't tell if they were memories or inventions of my tormented imagination. 18 months into my divorce, I hit a breaking point. I was at home on a Saturday afternoon in spring. I wasn't supposed to be working, but I had called in an excuse because the truth was that I couldn't face the world that day. I couldn't face going to work and pretending to be competent. I couldn't face interacting with people who were still moving through their lives, still functioning normally. I was lying on my bed, still wearing the clothes I had slept in, staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looked like it was getting bigger every time I looked at it. I had a bottle of whiskey on the nightstand, half full. I had been working on it all morning. I had a pistol in a box under my bed, my grandfather's gun, something I had kept all these years without ever thinking seriously about using it. .38 revolver, old but well maintained. I had kept it clean and oiled in the way that people keep inherited things in good condition. I thought about it that day. I thought about using it. I thought about how much simpler it would be if I just stopped existing. If I removed myself from the equation, how nobody would really miss me. Diana certainly didn't. She had moved on to Brad. She had erased me from her life with remarkable efficiency. My parents were aging, and they already had my sister to worry about. She had 3 kids and a good life. She didn't need me. Work would find another foreman. There were plenty of people capable of doing what I did. I was reaching for the box under the bed when my phone rang. The sound was so unexpected that I flinched. It jarred me out of the fog that had surrounded me for so long. I hadn't received a call in weeks. Nobody called me anymore. I had allowed all of my friendships to atrophy and die. My family had stopped calling after I hadn't returned their calls for months. My parents still tried occasionally, but I never answered, and eventually they stopped trying. I almost didn't answer. The phone kept ringing, and I lay there listening to it, debating whether I should reach out and answer or just let it ring until it went to voicemail. But some small part of my brain, some vestigial instinct for survival, made me pick up the phone. I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. The sound of my own voice seemed unfamiliar, like it was coming from someone else. There was a pause on the line, then a voice, female, older, with an accent I couldn't quite place, British, maybe, or something close to it. The voice asked. "Yes," I said. "My name is Eleanor Hartwell," the voice said. "I got your number from a business contact. I know this is random, but I'm calling because I need your help. My granddaughter was almost hit by a car last week. A man pulled her out of the street. A man named Marcus Chen. I didn't remember any of this. I had no recollection of saving anyone's life. My mind had been so damaged, so focused inward on my own pain, that entire days seemed to pass without leaving any impression. I would wake up and not remember what day it was. I would go to work and not remember the work I had done. The world around me had become a blur, and I had become a ghost moving through it. But the voice on the phone was describing an event in vivid detail. A young girl. A bus. My intervention. Someone had pulled a child out of the street, and that someone was apparently me. "I think you have the wrong number," I said. "No, I don't," Eleanor said firmly. "I tracked you down specifically. I looked at police reports from the accident. I asked the witnesses who the man was. They gave me a description. I put together pieces of information until I found you." "I don't remember," I said honestly. "That makes sense," Eleanor said. "You seem like you've been going through something, but I remember, and my granddaughter remembers." "You're welcome," I said automatically. "But I'm also calling because I think you need help," Eleanor continued. "My granddaughter's father passed away years ago. She's been missing that presence in her life, the presence of a man she can trust, a man who can show her that men can be good, that men can be reliable. I think you're someone who could provide that. I think you're someone who saves people." I didn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. The words were too close to the truth of what I was thinking, what I had been contemplating just moments before she called. "There's a job opportunity," Eleanor continued. "I own a development company. We're working on a project, and we need someone with construction expertise. The pay is good. The work is important. I have a job," I said. "But you're not showing up for it," Eleanor said. And I understood that she had done her research, that she had looked into my life, had found out things about me that I thought were private. "And I don't think that job is good for you anymore. I think you need to do something different." I should have said no. I should have hung up the phone and gone back to my box of memories and regrets and the gun underneath my bed. I should have made the choice that I had been contemplating. But something in Eleanor's voice, some quality of certainty, of purpose, of someone who knew exactly what they were saying, made me listen. "Tell me more," I said. Eleanor's project was a commercial development in the suburbs of Columbus. Nothing fancy or glamorous, but well-designed and important in its own way. It was supposed to be a mixed-use facility with retail on the ground floor and office space above. She needed someone who understood construction, who could coordinate between architects and contractors, who could manage the complexity of bringing a project to completion on time and on budget. She hired me as the project manager, which meant I was responsible for coordinating between the architects, the contractors, and the development team. It meant I was responsible for the timeline, the budget, the safety protocols, the quality control. It also meant I had to show up every day and be competent. For the first month, I was terrible. I missed meetings. I made mistakes in calculations and coordinations that cost the project money and time. I was short with people, snapping at contractors when they asked questions, being dismissive of the architect's concerns. I was angry at the world, and I was taking it out on everyone around me. My supervisor, Eleanor herself, met with me after the first week and told me that if I couldn't commit to this job, I should leave. "I'm committing," I said. "No, you're not," Eleanor said bluntly. "You're showing up, but there's no one inside those eyes. You're a ghost, Marcus, a ghost going through the motions." "I'll get better," I said. Eleanor asked. I didn't have an answer. "You need to stop feeling sorry for yourself," Eleanor said, and her words were harsh but not unkind. She was an older woman, probably in her 60s, with gray hair and a face that had been weathered by decades of living, but her eyes were sharp, and they saw right through me. "You got hurt. That happens to everyone, but you're the only one who can decide whether that hurt is going to destroy you or transform you. Right now, you're choosing to let it destroy you, but that's a choice." Something about the way she said it made me listen, made me actually hear what she was saying, instead of just hearing words pass by while I was lost in my own misery. I started going to the gym. I started eating real food instead of the fast food and cheap alcohol I had been surviving on. I started shaving again and wearing clean clothes that actually fit instead of clothes that hung off my thinning frame. I started showing up to work early and staying late. I started to re-engage with the world instead of hiding from it. And I started to remember why I had become a construction foreman in the first place. It wasn't just the money. It was the satisfaction of building something, of watching a project come together, of being part of a team that created things that would last. It was the knowledge that I had contributed something real and tangible to the world. Over the next year, the development project came together beautifully. We brought it in on time and under budget. The commercial center was beautiful, well-designed, functional, sustainable. And people noticed. Other developers started seeking out Eleanor's company specifically. Other clients started asking for me to manage their projects by name. I had become someone who people wanted to work with again. I received a promotion, then another. By the time the development was complete, Eleanor offered me a partnership in her company. "You saved my granddaughter's life," she told me, "but she also saved yours. So I'm going to give you an opportunity. We're going to expand. We're going to take on bigger projects." I took the partnership, and I started to build again. Not just buildings, but a life. Sophie was 9 years old when I saved her life. I didn't remember doing it. My mind had been too damaged at that time to hold on to memories of good things, but she remembered with the clarity that only children can remember important moments. She remembered me pulling her out of the street. She remembered the feel of my arms around her, lifting her to safety. She remembered being alive because of me, and she decided that I was worth knowing. At first, it was Eleanor who pushed the relationship. She would invite me to family dinners, and Sophie would be there. She would tell me stories about the school day, about her friends, about the books she was reading and the movies she wanted to see. And I would listen, because listening was the one thing I was capable of doing. I could listen while the rest of me was still broken and healing. Sophie was a bright girl. She asked questions about how buildings were designed, why some structures were stronger than others, what materials were best for different purposes. She had a curiosity about the world that reminded me why I had fallen in love with construction in the first place. But gradually, Sophie started reaching out on her own. She would call the office and ask to speak to me. She would ask if I could help her with a school project about architecture. She would send me drawings of buildings she had designed, asking for my opinion, asking if I thought they were good. Her handwriting was careful and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who was still learning to write, but was determined to do it correctly. By the time she was 12, she was coming to construction sites with me on weekends. Eleanor would drop her off at a project I was managing, and we would spend the day together. I would show her how buildings were assembled, how materials were selected, how safety protocols kept people from getting hurt. I would teach her about structural engineering and the importance of foundations. She would listen intently, asking questions, taking notes in a small notebook that she carried with her. "I want to build things too," she told me one day, standing on a site where we were constructing a hospital addition. The building was starting to take shape, the frame up, the walls beginning to be installed. "I want to design buildings that help people, like hospitals." "You can do that," I said. "You're smart. You have the creativity for it," she asked. "I did," I said. "And look where I ended up, not just in terms of my career. Look at what happened because I kept showing up, kept working, kept moving forward. I met your grandmother. I met you." Her mother, Catherine, noticed the connection forming between Sophie and me. At first, I think she was worried. She was a single mother trying to raise her daughter alone after losing her husband to an accident. The last thing she probably wanted was another man entering her daughter's life, potentially destabilizing things, potentially disappearing when things got hard. But eventually, she understood that what Sophie and I had was something pure. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't obligatory. It was simply two people who needed each other, finding that need fulfilled in the other's presence. It was a father-daughter relationship, born out of circumstance but solidified by genuine care and mutual respect. When Sophie was 14, her mother married David, a surgeon with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He was a good man, and he tried to be a good stepfather to Sophie. But he wasn't me. He didn't have the understanding of who Sophie was, a girl who had lost her father when she was too young to remember him, who had found a replacement father figure in a man who had been broken and rebuilt himself. David was trying to fill a role without fully understanding what the role required. I was 38 years old when Eleanor called me into her office with news that would change everything. "I've decided to retire," she said. "I'm getting older, and I want to spend time with my family while I'm still healthy enough to enjoy it." "Eleanor, I can't," I started to protest. "Yes, you can," she said firmly. "You've already proven that you can. You've managed every project I've given you. You've exceeded expectations on every one. But I was a construction foreman 2 years ago," I said. "I was broken. You were someone who was willing to work," Eleanor said. "That's all I needed to know. The rest, the business skills, the management expertise, you can learn. What you can't learn is character." She handed me a folder. Inside were documents transferring ownership of the company to me. It wasn't a gift. I was buying it, with a payment plan that would take 5 years. But she was financing it herself, at favorable terms that no bank would ever have offered me. "I'm giving you this chance," Eleanor said, "because someone gave me a chance a long time ago, and because I believe in you." 3 years after taking over Eleanor's company, I was in my new office, a corner office on the 22nd floor of a downtown building that overlooked the city, when my CFO came in with bad news. "We have a significant accounting discrepancy," he said. "Someone's been creating false invoices and charging them to our accounts." I felt cold. $8.7 million. That was almost twice what my company was worth when I had taken it over. I asked. "Vincent Morse," the CFO said. "Director of Accounts. He's been with the company for 7 years." Vincent Morse. The name hit me like a physical blow. Vincent Morse. The man Diana had left me for. The man I had watched walk out of my house on an afternoon when my world was collapsing. The man who had helped destroy my marriage. Who had stood in my kitchen talking to my wife. Who had helped her betray me. And now he had been stealing from me. I asked. "Sophisticated scheme," the CFO said. "He created vendors that don't exist. He generated invoices for work that was never done. He set up accounts in foreign banks to launder the money. Pulled together everything," I said, my voice steady and calm despite the rage that was building inside me. "Every transaction, every invoice, every connection to his accounts," the CFO asked. "I'm going to destroy him," I said quietly. 2 days later, I called Vincent into my office. He came in with the casual confidence of a man who had successfully deceived a company for half a decade. He was older now, in his early 60s, with gray hair that had started to thin at the crown. He was wearing an expensive suit tailored to fit his aging body. He looked like someone who had succeeded in life, who had never faced real consequences for anything. "Vincent," I said, not inviting him to sit. My voice was quiet but had an edge to it that made him pause. For a moment, he looked confused. Then understanding dawned, followed by cold calculation. I could see the moment when he realized that he had been caught, that his careful scheme had been discovered. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. I slid the documents across my desk. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of false invoices, phantom vendors. Money transferred to accounts that could be traced back to him. It was perfect, irrefutable proof of systematic fraud. There was no way he could deny it. There was no way he could claim that he hadn't done it. He looked at the documents and his face went white. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice wavering. "No," I said calmly. "There aren't. And I've already contacted the FBI. They're going to want to talk to you about this." He looked at me, and recognition flickered in his eyes. He said, "Marcus Chen? From Columbus, Ohio," I said. "Yes, I'm that Marcus, the construction foreman whose wife you fucked, the man whose life you helped destroy." I pressed a button on my phone. "Security," I said. 2 security guards appeared within seconds. "Mr. Morse is being terminated effective immediately," I said. "Please escort him from the building. Make sure he collects only his personal items." Vincent looked like he wanted to say something, to beg for mercy, to offer explanations, to claim that he had changed. But something in my face stopped him. He saw a man who had been destroyed and rebuilt himself, and who had absolutely no sympathy for a man who had spent his life destroying others. The guards escorted him out. 3 days later, Diana showed up at my office. I hadn't seen her in more than a decade. She looked older, worn down by years of living with a man who was fundamentally dishonest, who was now facing federal charges for fraud. She was thinner than I remembered, and her eyes had lost the light that I had fallen in love with all those years ago. The light had been replaced by something darker. Regret, maybe. Or simply the exhaustion of a life lived with the wrong person. "Marcus," she said, sitting down in the chair across from my desk without being invited. "I know you have every right to refuse to see me," I asked. "Vincent got arrested," she said. "The FBI froze all our accounts. He stole millions of dollars from your company. He's going to prison. And I'm—" Her voice trailed off. She looked small and defeated. I looked at her for a long moment. This was the woman I had loved. This was the woman who had broken my heart, who had told me I wasn't enough, who had decided that ambition and sophistication mattered more than loyalty and commitment. This was the woman who had looked me in the eye and lied to me repeatedly, who had built an entire parallel life without hesitation or guilt. I asked. "I don't know," she said. "Advice, maybe. Help. I have no money, no job, no prospects. I have nothing, Marcus." I should have told her that I didn't care. I should have told her that she had made her choices and now had to live with them. I should have thrown her out of my office and told her never to come back. After all, she had destroyed me. She had broken my marriage, broken my heart, broken my will to live. She had caused me to contemplate ending my own life. She deserved nothing from me. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I thought about Sophie, who had saved my life by needing me. I thought about Eleanor, who had given me a second chance when I was broken and dying. I thought about all the moments in my life when someone had chosen to show me grace instead of judgment, when someone had chosen to help me instead of destroying me further. "There's a non-profit I fund," I said. "It's a vocational training center for adults who are starting over. They teach everything from skilled trades to business management to culinary arts. They have high standards, and they're selective." Diana looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Why would you help me?" "Because," I said, "I learned a long time ago that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And because I'm not the man I was when you left me, I'm someone different now." I wrote down the contact information for the nonprofit director. I told Diana to mention my name. I told her that the program was rigorous, but that it worked if she was willing to put in the effort. She took the information like it was made of glass, like it might shatter if she held it too tightly. Her hands were shaking. "I don't deserve this," she said. "You don't," I agreed. She left without saying anything else. I never saw her again, but I heard through mutual acquaintances that she eventually completed the program. She moved to Denver and opened a restaurant. I hope she found peace there. I hope she remembered that there are people in the world who will extend grace even when they have every right to withhold it. Today, I'm 45 years old. I'm the CEO of a company worth over $20 billion. We've expanded from Eleanor's original real estate development firm into a massive conglomerate that includes construction, project management, commercial development, and infrastructure building. We have offices in 12 states. We employ thousands of people. We build buildings that matter, hospitals and schools and affordable housing complexes. We work with nonprofit organizations. We restore historic structures. We build communities. But more importantly, I have Sophie. She graduated from high school 3 years ago and is now studying architecture in college. She comes to my office sometimes and asks for my advice on projects. She's brilliant and kind and has her own vision for what buildings can be. Spaces that are beautiful but also functional, that serve communities and make people's lives better. She wants to design buildings for nonprofits, for communities that can't afford to hire famous architects. She wants to use her skills to help people. I have Catherine, Sophie's mother. We started dating 2 years ago after her divorce from David was finalized. It's a quiet relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than the desperate passion of my marriage to Diana. We don't talk much about the future in grand terms. We just take each day as it comes, choosing each other over and over. I don't know if it will last forever, but I know that we're both choosing each other every single day, and that's more than I had before. I have the satisfaction of having built something real and meaningful. My company doesn't just chase profit margins. We build buildings that matter. We work with organizations that serve the poor and the vulnerable. We create affordable housing in neighborhoods where people have been priced out. We restore historic structures that might otherwise have been demolished. We build communities, and we do it with integrity and care. And I have the memory of the day I saved a little girl's life, not knowing that she would eventually become the person who saved mine. Sometimes I drive past the spot where I pulled Sophie out of the street. The intersection is unchanged. The same traffic lights, the same crosswalk, the same stretch of pavement where a moment of my attention changed both of our trajectories. A moment where I chose to act instead of letting something terrible happen. A moment that led to everything that came after. I think about the man I was when I was lying on that bed with a bottle of whiskey and a gun. I think about how close I came to ending everything. I think about how glad I am that I didn't. I think about the fact that if I had made a different choice that day, I would never have known Sophie, would never have met Eleanor, would never have had the opportunity to rebuild myself into someone better than I was. Because the thing nobody tells you about trauma and pain and heartbreak is that they're not the end of your story. They're not the point at which your life becomes defined. They're just moments. Terrible, devastating moments, but moments nonetheless. They're punctuation, not conclusion. They're the low points before the climb, not the final destination. And if you survive them, if you choose to move forward, if you allow other people to help you rebuild, then those moments become the foundation for something entirely new. They become the bedrock upon which you build a better life. I'm not the same Marcus who was broken by Diana's infidelity. I'm not the same Marcus who almost killed himself in an apartment above a hardware store. I'm someone entirely different. Someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who understands that success isn't about money or status, but about being the kind of man that people can trust, that people can depend on, that people can believe in. And that, I think, is the greatest achievement of my life.